For those of you joining early, just give us a few minutes here while we reach the top of the hour and allow the rest of the participants to come in. So hang tight. Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock in the United States, East Coast time. So I wanted to welcome everyone today to the first installment of our webinar series, Beyond the Scan, Real World Applications for 3D Body Data. In this series, we will be exploring ways to innovative companies and organizations are utilizing 3D body scanning to transform the apparel, health, and fitness industries. Just a note on the format, it will be discussion between our guest speaker and myself today. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section on your Zoom panel, and we'll get to them towards the end. For those of you who do not know your host today, SciStream is the leader in affordable 3D body scanning solutions. We are based in Raleigh, North Carolina, with sales and support offices in London, Bangalore, and Hong Kong. With over 20 years of experience in bringing 3D body scanning technology to market, we strive to be the thought leader in our industry by bringing relevant and insightful content about 3D body scanning. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jeff Messer, and I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing for SciStream, and I will be taking you through the presentation today. In today's episode, we will be exploring how 3D body scanning fits within the world of virtual design and development. More specifically, we will explore how 3D body scanners and virtual design solutions are making a positive impact on one of the industry's leading issues, garment fit, or, as we're about to hear more about, the lack thereof. So let me take a moment just to introduce everyone to our guest speaker, Mark Harrop. He is a fashion industry figurehead with over 4 decades of experience in designing, selecting, and implementing a broad range of digital solutions, including CAD, CAM, PDM, CPM, PLM, and extended PLM solutions. Mark's storied career of over 45 years in apparel has seen him fill roles in cutting room manager, work study engineer, and production director. And today he's working as a digital solutions selection advisor and blogger. Mark has also established himself as a leader in fashion technology and education, and is a frequent speaker in digital solutions for the retail, footwear, and apparel industry supply chain. So with that rather lengthy introduction, Mark, I'll turn it over to you for today's deep dive into the world of 3D design and development.
Thank you, Jeff. Can you give me the screen?
Sure.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming online to listen to Jeff and I speak about 3D and scanning technologies and the issue around fit. And to put that lengthy sort of who is Mark Harrop into context, I thought for today, I wanted to just quickly add to that during my 45 years career, when I got involved in CAD/CAM in the 80s, one of the first jobs that I undertook was to manage a patent making and bureau service, employing 12 master patent makers, where we service brands and retailers from around Europe. We serviced all sorts of industries, or industry sectors, should I say. So we did everything from workwear, career wear, the Ministry of Defence, as we call it here in the UK, making nuclear biological suits. We also work for what we call our jolly green giant of the UK, Marks and Spencer, where for them, fit was synonymous with the company. It was, your mothers, your fathers, everybody talked about, Marks and Spencer's in a nice way when it came to fit. So when asked by Jeff and the team to come and speak today on the webinar, I really jumped at the chance because for me, it's honestly a subject that I'm passionate about. And I just sort of want to end this intro by saying it all starts with the quality of data in delivers the best possible outcome. So let's keep quality of data in mind as we go through this talk today. Just having an issue on moving the slides, Jeff. There we go. So, returns. Unfortunately, Jeff, same again. Can you just click for me?
Sure.
Right. Okay, just hold it there then. So, today we're talking about returns. In this slide, you can see on that screen, we see Amazon there. That screen is actually very interesting because we're seeing Amazon dropping off its returns in one of the Kohl's stores in the US, which is interesting that you've got a couple of partners coming together to try and resolve this issue we have with fit. Now, if you can again click, Jeff, a couple of more times, just bring up the main slides. That's it. That's fine. So one of the big issues that we have today is that percentage of returns. We talk about 52% in this particular slide, coming from the analysts. Actually, the returns figure is higher than that. The 52% only refers to the issues of fit, whereas for $550 billion worth of returns, we have, as I say, 52% linked to products being too small. We have some 22% linked to products being too large. We then have, let's call it a gray area, where we have styling issues, that's 8%, and we have people changing their minds. And I'm struggling to think how we can stop that apart from playing mind games with them. But so 20% styling and change of minds, let's move that aside. But still 52% for fit. For me, it is frightening. Now, if we go to bricks and mortar companies, or high street companies, then, they're faring better. They're in a better place because their return rates are running between 8 and 10%. But unfortunately, we have another issue there. We've just hit a milestone in 2019. In fact, it was in April of this year when the non-store, if you like, e-commerce, I call them the e-tailers, surpassed bricks and mortar sales for the first time. So the online sales now are where it is. So that 8 and 10% is being eroded. It's moving away. And in actual fact, it's more like the 52+% is the real issue that we're facing. So let's take that a little bit further. Can you move the slide forward again, Jeff, please?
Certainly.
So, solving the fit problem. That's a challenging question, isn't it? Just looking at that top left-hand side screen, we can see that we all come in different shapes, different sizes. The tall, the short, the slim, the slender, the stout, or portly. So I think for me, the big question for you, the listeners, the retailers, the brands, the e-tailers is, who is your customer? Who really is your customer? And do you honestly know? I honestly, I don't think so. And unless we have a clear answer to that question, we can't solve the problem. It's like somebody denying that they have a health issue or alcohol issue. Unless we admit it, we can't do something about it. And I think that retailers, brands, e-tailers need to step back and accept that we have a problem and then try to identify what's happening there. So most retailers and brands today will have developed the patterns from blocks, hopefully, that is, from blocks based upon what they perceive to be the target customer. Now, if they do that, for me, that's best practice. But even so, there's an issue. Just like we can see on the right-hand side of this picture, the issue that we are still building products based on an average person, not identifying our true customer. Now, some companies, it's even worse. I travel around the world. I'll meet brands, I'll meet retailers, I'll meet the new emerging e-tailers. Some of them are the biggest in the world, and some of them are the newcomers. But one thing I pick up, and it frightens me, that companies that purchase ready-to-wear products often tell me, I ask them, tell me about your process, how do you do it? And they'll start by saying, well, we're advanced, we're using advanced systems, we've moved into PLM, we build a specification, we send the size requirements to our vendors, and they supply patterns. And one of my first questions then is, who owns the blocks? Do you understand what a block is? Do you own the first patterns? Do you multi-source? Do you source from different parts of the world? Because if you do you share those blocks from the original data set? And often the answer is no. The answer is no, that's not our issue. Our issue is to buy product from the mills, the factories out there, and it's for them to look after the base patterns and the blocks. So if they've got 5 different suppliers producing the volume, you can imagine they've got 5 different fits. And as I say, it's frightening. So how might we resolve that problem? Well, for me, the first step in solving the fit problem is, like I said before, is to accept that we have a problem. And then the only way of solving it is to really get to know our customers. And let's keep in mind that for me, your customer is unique. They're unique to your business. They've joined your team, your community, your influencers, your trend, and more today, they follow your story and your messages. And these are the targets we need to get to know better and better. And the customer fit for me today, you know, if it was Amazon or Kohl's or Marks and Spencer or tiny indie brands, you know, regardless of size, we need to put size and returns onto the, you know, onto the agenda at each of the board meetings, because it's so problematic today that it's the, actually it's, you know, whether we survive or whether we're going to die. And certainly whether you accept it or not, you may have great sales, but if your returns are as high as your sales, you know, the truth is you've got, you know, eroding margins all the time. But let's move on to another aspect of fit. We've got other criteria that we need to consider related to fit. We need to explain to our customers what fit means. I mean, it's one thing coming into a store, picking up a product, you know, looking at it, feeling it, going into the changing rooms, trying it on. And it's another when we're buying from a online business. And that also makes me think we need to explain our fit better to be more precise. We need to explain jargon that we use within our industry when it comes to fit. So the word ease, for example, the more ease, the looser the fit. The less ease, the tighter the fit. Functional fit is another issue. Are we making leisure wear or workwear? Are we making fashion products, or are we making products that fit for a certain purpose? Each of these methods of fit, as I say, need to be carefully considered. And we also need to be careful and mindful that some of the marketing teams are very creative when writing. And one of the, as it said earlier in one of the earlier slides, products sometimes don't meet up to the expectations. The writing skills outweigh the product when it arrives. And I've seen it myself, and I'm sure the listeners on this call have seen it. When a product arrives, you unbox it with you know, degree of excitement, only to find, wow, this looks tacky. It's not right. The quality's poor. It doesn't fit well. It's disappointing. But that gets down to other, you know, detail like seam types, because certain seam types, whether it's vertical or horizontal seams, will affect fit. Materials, whether it's been cut straight on the grain or it's a few degrees off the grain, will affect the stretch of the fabric, or whether it's completely cut on the bias purposely to sort of hug the body and create different fit. It's something that we need to carefully consider. So on to 3D and virtual design. Those on the call that know me and know me well know that I'm a massive fan when it comes to 3D and virtual design. I got involved in 3D in the early years, in actually 1985, when I worked for a company in the US called Microdynamics. And that was on footwear design solutions. And we used 3D scanning in those days to develop lath design. We engineered the 3D laths. We had them in some cases made of wood, or we were using plastic way back in the early days, so way ahead of our time. And we had the opportunity, certainly I had the opportunity to scan famous football teams like the England international team. And by the way, sorry, to our American friends, football for me is your soccer. And as we invented it first, I'm going to keep saying football. But it was an exciting time, and it was the introduction to 3D. And of course, from that point for me, I could see where 3D was going from the foot to the full body. Now, just pausing a moment and thinking about 3D. Often when a retailer, brand, or manufacturer, because there's more and more manufacturers coming to me today to talk about 3D, and they come to me and they ask for advice and they say, Mark, what do you think we should do with 3D? How should we start? Who should we, which solution should we buy? And before I move on to who the vendors might be, my first question is, but why do you want 3D? What is it you want to solve? Are you aiming to solve a fitting problem? Do you want to be more creative and design on 3D, like in this shot we can see here? Do you want to do more? So to be more efficient using the same resources and develop more products? Do you want to actually improve quality by engineering a three-dimensional product that you couldn't do in a two-dimensional world to see what effect it might have? Or do you want to reduce the number of samples? So depending on the answer to that, the critical questions that the retailer or brand, or as I said, manufacturer gives me, will then create the answer. Well, help me to create the answer, I should say. Because if it's leaning towards science of fit, then we're talking engineering and engineering patterns. But if it's leading towards being more creative and producing virtual products that can be shown online, so the virtual twins, then it's leaning in a different direction, which is more of solutions coming from the animation world or gaming world, whereas engineering is coming from the two-dimensional patterns into the 3D world and having lived through that workflow. So let's assume we answer the question, one or the other, and then we can focus on them. So the next question coming from one of the retailers and brands, and let's go down the science of fit, because that's what we're talking about today. The next session with me would be to talk about avatars and how should we design them and what should we design. Now, the first thing I would want to do is to talk to them about target customers and fitting those avatars to the customer. That's number one. However, real life experience is telling me that out of those growing number of 3D users, we're finding that they're taking avatars off the shelf. They're being provided with avatars when they purchase the product. They're developing avatars based on a fit model or photographic models. And the problem with that, of course, is a fit model is supposed to be the representation of the average person, target customer, and photography models are those beautiful models, or men, ladies, whatever, that we see on beaches and so on, promoting products. So they're made, fit for purpose, if you like. And my concern is that avatars are not being scientifically engineered towards the population. So my recommendation is that we create avatars that are linked to the process, so fit models, and the avatars in that instance should actually be named to the actual person. So we have Jane and Julie and Sandra and Tony and Stephen, whoever those fit models are. And those avatars should be updated, because whether we like it or not, people change. And I've been involved in these tests where we've made avatars, we've measured them very, very carefully to ISO standards, extremely carefully. We've then built the avatars, we've built the product, and we've suggested what would happen when the fit model actually wears the product, what problems, what issues they would have. And I'm pleased to say that that's worked. And out of 10 suggestions on what a fit model would actually say, 8 or 9 of them came true. And that was one of the acid tests for the retailer to go on to purchasing 3D. And for me to believe in this, these solutions. Now, what we ultimately want, if we're going to cure the problem of that 52%, is to create avatars based on customer demographics and develop them based on engineered patterns. So we move from a 3D avatar to 2-dimensional patterns that are engineered along with the critical grading points and extra points that people never see unless they're looking deeply into the size chart. And let's call these our community avatars that are based on somebody's age and gender and income and nationality and social class, because social class comes into it. If you can't afford to buy, you're going to a certain level of garment, you can't afford to pay the price, you've got to go to a certain store that provides low-cost products. Could even go as far as religion. Religion will dictate what people wear and how they wear it. So let's keep that in mind. But I'm going to pass this over to the listeners today and say, that's your homework, is to understand who your customers are and how they fit into that 3D world and the science of fit. Now, let's get into science of fit a little bit more. So anybody that knows me knows that I'm, as I've said earlier, a big supporter for 3D. But having said that, for me, there's a 3D comes with other tools. And when I say other tools, I'm thinking material testing. Today we need new engineered tools that stretch, that pull, that allow a material to drape and so on. And we measure it, and we're creating new words to describe that process in some detail. But at the same time, like I said at the start of this session, quality of data in will decide on the quality of product that we end up with. So on that, in my book, we need to start with scanning. We can't just build avatars based on drawings. It's not, it's not a sketch, it's not a design. We're engineering a product. We're like architects, if you like. And it is critical for me. Jeff, can you just click the slide forward a little bit and let's look at some of the stats?
Sure.
So measuring. 95% of companies are reporting that they're continuing to use traditional measures, tape measures, and so on. I did a little research on this a few years ago and actually found with some guys who created an electronic tape measure without any numbers on there, no inches, no metric, no anything. And they simply pulled this tape measure out and it could create the measurements. And it was an interesting one, but unfortunately it's not caught on. So still, it doesn't surprise me to see that 95.5% of the companies are still measuring in that traditional way. And we'll talk about this further on, but there are issues with that about how to measure. I think people don't take care. There is no real manual. There is no standard I can pick up very easily and follow precisely. Have we got our arms in a certain, angle? Have we Are we bending the elbows? Are we, doing something when being measured than just standing there like the lady in the middle here is just standing in that pose? It's not real. So as I say, it doesn't surprise me, but we're not good at it. The time taken, on average, 27.1 minutes. That's 3 products. So we're talking about 10 minutes per product. It's an awful long time. As a work study engineer myself, when we talk, I talk in milliseconds, TMUs, time measurement units, where we're talking 2,000ths of a minute. And when you talk about 10 minutes, for me, that's an age. And an age and a concern. And I'm not sure, as I said, that people are doing it correctly. So 10 minutes per garment is worrying. The next big deal for me, and it really worries me, is that companies report 5mm tolerance is acceptable. Now, I haven't gone into this analysis enough. I don't know it enough, but my first thoughts are certainly not if we're talking patterns, because if we're talking pattern making, when I was involved in pattern making running that bureau, we talked about pinhead accuracy. So a pin would go through the pattern, and that to the other side it would meet the pinhead. So that was a sort of accuracy. And I often said to people working as master pattern makers, do we really need to worry about that? Is it 0.5 millimeter? Is it 1/16 of an inch? Whatever it is. Do we really need to worry? And the answer back was, well, when there's 2 or 3 seams, maybe not. But on lingerie, we may be talking 10 seams. You add that tolerance or that mismeasurement onto each seam, and we end up with not one size different, but probably 2 different sizes there. So unless we start with that sort of pinhead accuracy in our minds, then the chance of delivering good fitting garments are almost impossible.
So Mark, I think I can help clear that up. This particular statistic related to the level of accuracy that was expected on the measuring of the body. So these professionals who were surveyed for this particular study said that they were looking for better than 5mm accuracy on body measurements, not the pattern development itself.
Right.
What's really
well, then that answers my fear there, because I was terrified when I saw that.
No. This was about body measurements, and the next stat, and I realize this may be shocking to some of the people watching and listening in today. This came from a IEEE study. We'll put the citations here at the bottom. Last year, where they compared hand measuring to body scanner measurements. And I'm not sure if everyone on the call is familiar with the answer tolerance, but that actually is a tolerance for measurement repeatability. And the truth is that 0% of the hand measurements were able to meet or exceed the answer tolerance for measurement repeatability. And the reason why we put that stat up there is that we hear it a lot at SizeStream. Companies call us and say, hey, I'm interested in 3D scanning, but I need to make sure it's accurate enough. And when we ask the question, well, how are you measuring today? They say, well, we measure by hand. And of course, that's how everybody does it. And the question we ask back typically is, well, how accurate are the hand measurements? And I think there's a bit of dysphoria out there about how repeatable and how accurate the hand measurements are. And in this particular study, by the way, the people doing those hand measurements came from retail world. So the whole point of the study was to determine how well can someone from a retail organization that isn't an answer measurer, that's not an ISO measurer, but these were senior people in a technical design organization. So it's important to understand that when we look at hand measuring compared to its repeatability of itself, the reality is hand measuring is not very repeatable, even when using things like landmarks on the body. And then, the last stat in there, which we found really interesting, is that a lot of these organizations, almost half, are reporting that they're not updating their size charts very frequently. So if this is what consumers are supposed to use as an indication of what's going to fit, as you pointed out earlier, Mark, that that size chart hasn't been updated in 3 years, and yet the population is changing in terms of their shape. People are, at least in the US, are getting heavier. So it's no wonder that so many people are reporting that product is too small.
Yeah, and let's add to that, Jeff, that it's not just size charts, that are not being updated frequently, but it's also, is the block ever getting updated? And do some retailers and brands actually know what a block is, or a toile? And I think a large percentage have no idea, and that's why they're simply merchants. They're buying product at good prices or whatever, shipping it in and selling it on, and they're building the knowledge, but unfortunately they're missing the real answers here. That we've got to start, and I'm happy to move away from 40 years ago, move aside the block and move to scan. So scan should be the next starting point. In the same way that people who listen to me when I'm talking out there, I say start with 3D and move to 2D. Not 2D, not, sketch, fine, but when you come to pattern making, start with 3, move back to 2, then move to marker making and cutting, or we don't need marker making anymore, let's move direct to digital cutting. But let's carry on, because I know I certainly talk too much.
It's all good information, and
well, I hope so. All right.
That's where we're kind of staying with the theme of today's session. How does 3D body scanning fit into these virtual workflows? Yeah. It was interesting when we looked at the survey that was conducted, and again, the citation will be here at the end, is that I think this number is a bit low, right? Why would more companies not think that 3D scans of customers would be useful? I think that's a number that we've got to see go up. Now, when we look at another stat that came from that survey, is that 86%, that's a good majority now, we're interested in designing apparel in 3D design from a true 3D body scan. So it looks like the interest is there, but when we ask the question, is it useful? Unfortunately, that number is a bit lower, and I think that's something we have to work on as an industry.
Okay, well, let me add to that. So, as I said, I've been involved in 3D for a while, and certainly this last 20 years-ish, I've been involved in 3D for clothing. And during that time, I've seen a massive interest. And let's say the last 5 years on WhichPLM, I use the analytics to measure who's coming, reading what on a weekly basis. And I can tell you that a third of the companies coming to WhichPLM today are coming to read articles, case studies, whatever, on the subject of 3D. The other analysis I've done, Jeff, which you guys might find interesting, I've polled the 3D companies. And just to say that today, there are around 1,600 companies around the world using 3D. So let's, that puts some of these numbers into context. And it doesn't surprise me. As I say, I see the climbing interest on a weekly basis coming into WhichPLM. Now, another thing, if you just click on again, this is the big deal for me. And the super big deal is, scanning time. It's 1/5 of the time, compared to the manual method. But not only is it a big saving in time, look at that number there. 240 different measurement points. Now, a lot of those we can link to the critical measures on the size chart. We can do some integration to the APIs and to the sizing models in PLM, and we can get the two to talk together. So it's like the Tesla car. It's the electricity or the fuel that's fueling the new models for measuring for me. So all that data, everything we've talked about so far, for me, it speaks for itself. It's something that we're going to see more and more of, and I'm really pleased for that.
For sure. And so I'll speak to the next stat, because I think while we would love to see this number at 100%, 73% of the scan measurements that came from the study that was done last year with the IEEE organization, that we found 73% of the scan measurements fell within that answer tolerance for the given measure. And understand that the tolerance on a measurement for the crotch is different than a measurement for, you know, the neck measurement or the shoulder points. So 73% of all of the data that was collected during that study related to SciStream, that is, of course, we didn't look at other people's data, that 73% of those measurements fell within the tolerance. And for what it's worth, that's a 73% increase over hand measurements. So while not perfect, it's certainly significantly better, and it gives hopefully the audience a better understanding of what you can expect from 3D body scanning, at least from SciStream. And then, you know, I want to touch on one more point, that this isn't part of a study. This is just a fact in using 3D scans from SciStream, that during a scan session, which in our world actually runs 3 consecutive scans within the same session, so that 90 seconds that's included in there, we capture 6 million data points about the body. So we talk a lot in this session, obviously, about measurements, but let's not forget the idea of capturing shape. And so that's one thing that 3D scanning has an advantage over the hand measuring, is that it's capturing the actual shape. As we see up in the image on the left, that's one of our scans in a 3D design system. So we can not only understand the measurements if we were doing something like parametric avatars, but in this case, we're actually capturing the real shape of that user's body and understanding where the weight and the size is being distributed across the body.
Jeff, and let me add to that, you know, in the early days of 3D, we were looking at a very low number of points in a avatar, polygons, and different methods of building those avatars. And with those 6 million data points linked to, you know, the requirements of the 3D systems to build these avatars, what you're saying is we're building avatars that are incredibly accurate and more lifelike, just like I had the analogy of an image, you know, on low resolution to very high resolution. And that's essentially what we've got. 6 million equals high resolution.
Great, and we've got questions coming in, so we're going to get to those. And
can we?
Yeah, we only have a couple more slides here, so we'll move forward to the topic of, you know, your target customer. You made such a salient point about that earlier, Mark.
Well, I just want to add a few more points on that then. So I think hopefully you'll agree that your target customer comes from your community, and that's people listening to your story, your influences, and everything else that I won't repeat. But the challenge is for the online world, because customers to the online world come from all over the world. And it's, you know, in this case, you need to be careful to consider, you know, making avatars and then avatars to 2-dimensional patterns for regions, for different countries. Let me just sort of explain why that is. I mean, it may be obvious to a lot of people on the call, but it may not be to others. So in Holland, the Netherlands, people are around 5'11", whereas in Japan, average height for a male is 5'7". In India, average height for a male is 5'5". Now, closer to home, for the American listeners online, you need 4 to 5 different height measures and body measures for African Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, and white Americans, because they, you know, from the African Americans tend to be taller, 5'9" on average, coming down to 5'6". So you know, that's the difference just in America alone. So on a regional basis, never mind a country basis. So the big challenge for everybody on the call is to create and to be creative in getting people, your customers, to be scanned. And this is where, again, it's one of those questions I put to the listeners online. Think about how we can incentivize your customers, whether that's in tokens or discounts, or whether it's, you know, walking away with a credit card with your own personal data on. It's key. It's absolutely key. Happy to move on to the next slide.
Yeah, as I say, we can juxtapose that towards a trend we've seen, right, which is just using scan surveys and database of existing avatars. So if we're not doing the scans of the actual customers, what do we think about taking pre-selected avatars from an existing database of scans?
Yeah, and when we talk databases, by the way, it often makes me think about GDPR. You know, about GDPR in Europe, where you know your emails, names, and so on are now very highly regulated, and in fact, companies like WhichPLM, we don't use your personal data without your permission. I think the same for people being scanned. Not to worry, you can opt in or opt out, and you can share your data and let the data be used to build the perfect pattern for that population, or you can keep it, personally and travel with it if you like. Now that brings me to surveys and databases, and again I've been involved in these since the early days. I like them. I like surveys, and I like the the survey population sizing that comes with them, and it's a good starting point. But for me, it's not the best, because in that picture on the left, what I'm getting is an average. I'm not getting that that person who walks into my store on a monthly basis, or better still, on a weekly basis. I'm simply getting the average people in that particular area where they were scanned. And I think what really matters here, when we think of the margin of error, is the sample size. Is it 10 people? That will give us a 31 to 32% margin of error. Is it 100 people? That will reduce the margin of error by another 10%. Or is it measuring 1,000 or more people that will reduce the error rates down to, single figures, 3.2%. There are calculators online that people can use to calculate the samples required to bring down the margin of error. Anybody interested in them, you can contact Jeff or myself, and we can lead you to that. But it comes back to, it's a good starting point for me, but it's not the answer. The answer is, in the previous slides, it comes back to those customers, your particular customer. So next slide.
As I say, that's a great segue, because we all know what's coming next, right? Can't we just ship mobile apps out there and then have all of our customers scan themselves?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to follow my current trend, if you like, for today's talk. I'm going to start by saying I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of apps. And, I remember the first PCs, personal PCs, IBM PX2s with 10 megabytes. And then I think about what I've got on my phone today, and the thousands and thousands of times more powerful than they were. But I've lived through that. So I'm all for change, and I'm all for newness. So these apps, there are currently about 20. I have probably a new app company coming to me once every couple of weeks and saying, Mark, we've got this new app, and it's going to solve the problem of returns overnight. And, it's going to problems of returns on footwear or clothing or whatever. And they're certainly, they're coming, as I say, every couple of weeks. And I listen to the stories. And then we get down to, I don't burst the bubble. I'm trying to be kind to them, but I'm trying to encourage them to get to the right way. But let's say there are 20 or more of these apps currently floating around. We're still at the very beginning. This is like 3D was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We still have a lot of issues. We still have a tremendous sales spin coming out to these companies. Often they have an app and they'll say, we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning. We can predict exactly what the size should be for that particular person. And they have the beauty of measuring in the privacy of their own home and comfort and so on. I'm fine. I get that. But Here's the big issue. What they're doing is they are taking a piece of the technology that anybody technical can go and find this technology, get their hands on it, and then what they're doing is scraping websites, the retailers, the brands, and so on, and they're taking the size ranges. Now, let's not get mixed up with a size range, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, whatever it is, small, medium, large, extra, extra large, whatever. And the difference between that and a detailed size chart. Now, I'm happy that this technology will improve, and I'm hoping it will. I'm hoping that people like SizeStream are going to help on this. But unless the app itself is tightly linked to that retailer and a brand's sizing model, then the chances of providing accurate feeds for the end user are tough. Let's say tough. All it's got to do at the moment is suggest, an average size. So I'm going to finish on this particular slide by saying, as far as I'm concerned, it's still a very good start and something that I'm really interested in following over the coming years.
Well, just on your point,
Oh,
yes. As at SizeStream, we have been in development on a mobile scanning product. We will hopefully have something to announce on that later this month. And I will tell you that we have not taken the path of doing 2 photographs in order to create an exact match avatar type situation. We decided that the best way to solve this problem is through a true 3D body scan. And so while we certainly applaud companies who are out there, driving that awareness with the brands and the retailers and the consumers that the technology can fit in the palm of your hand, we just are taking a bit of a different approach to it. And of course, we're being very cautious about how we go to market, not because we're worried about the booth scanners going out of style. It's really about making sure that we can uphold the accuracy and precision standards that we've set with our booth scanners. So I do think you're right. We got to test and verify that these mobile apps are able to accomplish a level of precision that is good for our use case. To your point, if we're doing size recommendations on ready to wear, it could be possible that the margin of error associated with a 2 photograph version of a scan makes sense. But for the customers that we work with anyways, and to your point, those are the manufacturers and retailers that do have control over their garments and their patterns. So they have a very high expectation on what that match rate needs to be in terms of a good body measurement to a science of fit.
Yeah.
So
we're very
excited about it. Yep.
And can I also suggest, Jeff, if you don't mind me saying this, that equally as a business involved heavily in scanners, partnerships between yourself and other vendors might not be a bad thing to consider as well. It's a combination of the, it's almost triangular. It's yourselves, retailers, brands, and some of the app developers may be very good to talk to and work with.
Agreed.
I'm putting you on the spot there. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
But it's my style.
We have worked with some of the companies that have developed their own mobile apps. Yeah. They've purchased our booth scanners in order to better establish baselines and understand.
There you go.
Yeah, so we're happy to do that.
Great.
So we do have some questions that came in during the talk, and I want to make sure to those, and I do appreciate everybody hanging on for the few extra minutes here. We ran a little over. But let's start with the first question, which was 73% measurements are within answer tolerance, which are most likely to be in or out of tolerance. So again, this goes back to a paper that we developed out of the research that was done with the IEEE, and there was a specific citation on the slide. It was a working group within the IEEE team that were looking to set some standards for both booth scanners. And this year, by the way, kind of speaking to the mobile app side of it, in a month, that same group will convene in Italy to test mobile app accuracy. So the same work that was done last year on boost scanners will be taken up with the same group on mobile apps. And so they'll be testing some of the apps that you've all heard about, as well as putting that up against boost scanners. But I wanted to just answer the question in that the measurement that is most difficult for both hand measures and scanners is inseam or crotch height. And so you're most likely to get variance on the crotch height, both from a scanner and hand measurements perspective. So hopefully that answers your question. The other question that came in was, can you please update on the building lifelike avatars that accurately represent the hard and soft areas of the body? So I'm not sure how to address that from a side stream perspective. We capture all of the data, whether it's hard or soft, not in terms of whether that gets animated. Mark, maybe you have some more insights on how to answer that particular question?
Well, my feeling on that, it comes back to those 6 million data points that are being captured, Jeff. And it again comes back to that relationship with the, the Browsworths, the Close, the Optitexes, Tuckertex, Gerber, Electra, these guys who operate in that 3D arena, for them to take the low res to high res in the form of avatars. And we are moving that way all the time. So I think it's about, as I said earlier, creating more points on the avatar so it becomes high resolution.
Well, hopefully that answers the question. And if not, you can always feel free to follow up with Mark or I after the webinar. And then there was another question that came in on retailers using Size UK data. And surely this tackles the issue of getting good data as a starting point. So yes, we know about regional surveys or Size North America, Size UK. Actually, SizeStream is currently conducting a large survey in India for the NIFT organization. So we're certainly aware of regional events. What are your thoughts on how that data ends up influencing technical or 3D virtual design?
I come back to what I've said all the way through this call. My concern with any of those sizing surveys is that they are, they're good. They are good. They're a great indicator about how a population changes over time. We in the UK, because the question was about sizing, the sizing survey in the UK. Originally, we had one done after the Second World War in the 50s. Then we had one done in, I think it was the late 90s or mid 90s timeframe, and then Size UK, recent works. And there, for me, we can plot on the graph how people are getting bigger, taller, heavier, lighter, whatever the answers are coming out of that. But it's not answering the question if, for me as a brand, if I'm a particular brand, it's not saying to me, these are my customers. I'm a luxury brand. These are customers walking into my store and buying from me. That, for me, part of my customer relationship management software. It's about recognition software I'm using in stores and so on. And it's about the individual being scanned.
Agreed. And I think that's
agreeing that population.
That's the ideal state we have to get to, right? Is that there's no reason with the amount of technology, we just talked about mobile applications, boost scanners are fast and convenient. There's no reason why we cannot know that user, not any user, but that user's body data before we recommend a product to them, whether that's in-store or online. So obviously we're a big believer in it, right? We have to scan the customer, know their relevant body dimensions, know their shape, and more importantly, or as importantly, I should say, is know their fit preference. So that when we recommend a product or we make a product for their body, in the case of a made to measure or a fast, a fast prototyping type situation, that we're able to put the person in the right product based on starting with good body data. And so we're very much working towards that end. Well, I do want to appreciate, I do want to thank everyone for hanging on for a few extra minutes. And I want to let everyone know that this is a series. Thank you so much, Mark, for being the initial installment of the series and providing the audience with so much good data on where we go in terms of the product development and the virtual design side of it. Next month, we will have Dr. Simeon Gill from the University of Manchester School of Materials, and he will be speaking about how universities and educational institutions are utilizing 3D body scanning as a way of helping the next generation of designers and technical folks grapple with the idea of building products for real bodies. So please join us, save the date, and we'll be bringing more information to you about that event as it draws closer. Again, thank you for everyone for participating. Thank you, Mark, for such a stimulating hour-long discussion. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Beyond the Scan, Real-World Applications for 3D Body Data. Good day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.